We are going to go over the practice problems from 12.1 to 12.2, starting with number 1. For 1 and 2, we are going to be changing these rational numbers into decimals. So we are starting with -3/20. And to change that to a decimal, we need to divide our numerator by the denominator. 20 does not go into 3. It goes in 0 times. So we're going to add a decimal point and hop it up. We'll add 3 zeros just for a good measure. Bring down the 0. 20 goes into 30 once. At 20, subtract, I get 10. Bring down the next 0. 20 goes into 100 5 times evenly. At 100, subtract, and we get 0. It was a -3/20, which makes it a -1500. Number 2, same idea. Our problem started as -11/9. It doesn't matter which number is bigger or smaller. We always divide our numerator by our denominator. 9 goes into 11 once. At 9, subtract, and I get 2. Add a decimal point, hop it up right away so you don't forget. Add 3 zeros, bring down the first 0. 9 goes into 20 twice. At 18, subtract, I get 2. Bring down. 9 goes into 20 twice. At 18, subtract, and I get 2. You will notice that we can just keep doing this forever and ever and ever. We don't want to do it forever, so we will say 1.2, repeating. That bar means that this 2 goes on forever. Okay, number 3. Now we are going to be changing the decimal into a fraction or a mixed number in simplest form. Number 3 started as -3500. So remember, place value as our best friend here. This 5 is in the hundreds place. We would read this -3500. That's exactly how we write it, -3500. From there, we need to work to reduce. We know both of these are divisible by 5. So we get -7/20. And it cannot be reduced anymore. Number 4. -1 and 205 thousandths. So we write it just as we read it. -1 and, that's our decimal point, -1 and 205 thousandths. From there, we need to reduce. We can divide both of these by 5. I'm not going to show this division worked out. I know you're capable of doing that. And it becomes -1 and 41 over 200. Okay, number 5, it gives us a set of numbers and we have to work to order them from least to greatest. The challenge is it's a mixed list with fractions, decimals, positives, and negatives. Okay, so least to greatest, we know that our smallest number has to be a negative. So we may want to just compare these. It doesn't matter. We can choose fractions or decimals. For me, I prefer to work in decimals. I know that -1/3 is equivalent to -0.3 repeating. If I didn't know that, I could simply divide 1 by 3 to get that figured out. Okay, so then I'm going to start just by comparing these two negatives to see which one is the smallest. -1/3 or -3/10 repeating is going to be farthest left on the number line, which means it's my smallest rational number. I'm gonna put it back in the form it started in for my final list. I know from there, I already have this in my list, that -2/10 has to be next because it's the only negative number. And then I can compare the positives and order them. But let's be smart about it. 6/5 is an improper fraction, 1 1/5. Well, I know that that's bigger than this decimal that's less than 1, okay? And I know 1 4/10 is bigger than this decimal that's less than 1, which means 5/10 comes next. So the only two I need to compare now are 6/5 and 1 4/10. So if we take our 6/5 and we change it into a mixed number first, 5 goes into 6 once, with 1 1/5 left over. A lot of us already know that 1/5 is equivalent to 2/10. If you didn't know that, take your 1/5, turn it into a decimal by, again, dividing the numerator by the denominator. 5 doesn't go into 1, 5 goes into 10 twice evenly. So now I can compare 1 2/10 and 1 4/10. 1 2/10 is smaller, which means it comes next in my list. But reminder, that number started as 6/5. So that's how I'm gonna order it in the set, which means 1 4/10 is the greatest number in the list. Okay, a few left. Number 6 is next. We are adding. Okay, we are adding -4/5 and -3/8. So anytime we add fractions, the first thing we need is a common denominator. 5 and 8, I'm gonna use 40 as my common denominator. It's the LCM. To get from 5 to 40, it's multiplying by 8. So I'm gonna do the same thing to my numerator. 8 times 4 is 32, and this was a negative. To get from 8 to 40, it's multiplying by 5. 3 times 5 is 15, and that was a negative. We are adding these two fractions. So I owe 32 and I owe 15. So we have to figure out the total that we owe. So if I add 32 and 15, the total that I owe is 47. And my denominator stays the same for addition. So -47 40ths. If I wanted to express that as a mixed number, 40 goes into 47 once. There are 7 left over out of 40. And again, this was a negative. Number 7. 7/12